My friend, thank you.
Right.
Let me bring in now Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland joining us now. He sits on the House Judiciary Committee. Congressman, thank you for being back in town early and coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Happy to be with you.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about, and let me pick up where Jeff Bennett left off. Are you encouraged by the president's meeting with Senator Manchin, at least talking, having the conversation about gun legislation?
Look, we sent them the universal criminal mental background check in February. They've done nothing with it, and hundreds of people have died in gun violence since then. So it looks like there's a lot of chatter, but we want them to pull the universal criminal background check off of Senator McConnell's desk with that 175 bill pile,
right.
Pull it out and vote the first day we get back. That's the very least. And then we can proceed to talk about a ban on high-capacity magazines, the red flag law legislation, and stripping guns from people who've been convicted of hate crimes. These are all things that we need to do. So there's a long overdue agenda, and the president should stop fooling around, and McConnell should stop fooling around and do his job.
I want to ask you if you'd be willing to accept some kind of a compromise. When you look at HRE and when you look at, for example, the Manchin-Toomey bill as it relates to background checks, right? The House bill would expand background checks on all gun sales. That includes private sales, right? Manchin-Toomey does not, but it does expand background checks at least to all commercial sales. If the president gets on board with Manchin-Toomey and says, I'm down, and Mitch McConnell says if the president's down, the Senate is down, would you be okay with that kind of a compromise?
No, enough with these Swiss cheese laws. What you're compromising is between public safety on the one hand and complete chaos and massacres and mounting gun casualties on the other hand.
So the idea of incrementalism, at least doing something, these small steps, that does not appeal to you. For you, it's pretty much all or nothing, it sounds like.
Well, it seems to me that the NRA is in complete disarray. Its political power has been vanquished. 9 out of 10 Americans are demanding a universal background check. We need reasonable gun safety legislation that is perfectly constitutional. The Supreme Court itself said in the Heller versus District of Columbia case that all of these are reasonable gun safety regulations that are totally consistent with the Second Amendment. We've got to stop fooling around and get serious about gun safety, because if it's, you know, your kids or your mother or your father, your uncle or aunt who's being killed, you don't want to say, oh, well, all of that was in the interest of a compromise. We need real gun safety legislation.
I want to ask you about other news developing this morning as it relates to the House Judiciary Committee, as well as others on Capitol Hill, that there are now calls for documents related to the vice president's stay at Doonburg in Ireland, the president's property, as well as questions that you have and others on your committee, apparently, about the president potentially hosting the G7 at his Doral resort near Miami next year. What is behind this? Why request these documents? What are you looking for?
Well, look, having meetings in Dublin and staying in Doonburg is like having meetings in Washington and staying in Asbury Park, New Jersey. It's 180 miles away. It makes no sense. So obviously we want to know what's behind it. But what's behind it is almost irrelevant. The president does not have the power under the Domestic Emoluments Clause to collect other payments from the United States government beyond his salary. He is limited to his salary. That's what the Constitution says. So when they go down to Mar-a-Lago and they spend $80,000 or $100,000 a day down there for the FBI and the Secret Service and the White House people to stay there, and they give that money to the Trump Hotel, it violates the Constitution. And even the Congress cannot excuse that. In terms of foreign emoluments, we've got the power to approve all of these government payments the president's been pocketing from Saudi Arabia and Egypt and United Arab Emirates. We haven't done that, but at least we could theoretically. With the domestic emoluments, we can't do it. So he's in violation of the Constitution, regardless of whether or not he told Pence to stay there, he encouraged him, he suggested it, or even if he protested and said, no, Mr. Pence, that's a terrible idea, I'm not allowed to take that money.
Your committee and oversight have asked for these documents by September 19th, just a few weeks away. You haven't had much luck, frankly, getting documents out of the administration in the past. Do you think realistically you will get this information when you want to get this information from this administration, or no?
Well, the Congress has the right to get the information it seeks. The Supreme Court has repeatedly said that the fact-finding power of Congress is implied by the legislative power. How can the people's representatives govern if we can't get the information?
So you're ready to subpoena for this, if you had to?
Oh, absolutely. And look, I think it's an impeachable offense when the President of the United States tells the executive branch to stop cooperating with congressional demands lawful congressional demands for information and with subpoenas. The president doesn't have that power. His job is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. We are the lawmaking branch of government. We've got a president who is behaving like a king, and it's intolerable.
I'm almost out of time, but before I let you go, I just want to get you on one other thing related to the hurricane and the, frankly, White House drama, if you will, over this whole Sharpie Gate thing. The Washington Post is now reporting that it was President Trump himself who made that line added to a map that showed Alabama now, as we're showing it here, in that cone of uncertainty in the early days of Dorian. The president has come under heavy criticism for this, for refusing to acknowledge that he was being misleading about this devastating storm. Where are you on this?
Well, this is obviously the most lawless presidency we've seen in our lifetime. It's the most reckless presidency we've seen in our lifetime. But it's also the most incompetent presidency we've seen in our lifetime. And I think that will be the political undoing of Donald Trump. I mean, this is just Saturday Night Live style cartoonish behavior by the president of the United States. The whole country is laughing about his black Sharpie amendments and corrections to reality. There's a very serious problem there. The question really is, will the Republican Party decide to go down with this president, or will they distance themselves from him and start to do the legislative work of the American people, like passing gun safety legislation on the very first day they come back in next week?
In the conversation now full circle, Congressman Jamie Raskin.